Hello and welcome to FinTechTalk. I'm your host, Charles Orton-Jones. Today we're looking at Gen Z, that enigmatic cohort that grew up with smartphones, love TikTok, Snapchat, and are moving in the internet world so fast that some of us older generations, Gen X here, can struggle to understand. So we're going to look at what FinTech can learn from this generation and how we can best cater to them. And to do this, we have, of course, invited two experts. So may I introduce the first of our panelists, Veronica Glab. She is Head of Partnerships and Investment at Innovate Finance. Now, I'm sure all of you know Innovate Finance. It is the UK industry body. Anyone is a member, from Revolut, Monzo, Tide, Thought Machine. It's the place where everyone gets together to discuss the industry. So there's no one better placed to talk about industry trends. Veronica, perhaps you could just introduce yourself. And I don't want to ask how old you are, but you might just want to say which cohort you fall into.
Okay, so hi, I'm Veronica Glab, Head of Partnerships and Investment at Innovate Finance. Basically, what I do is I run our annual investment report tracking venture activity and major trends in fintech around the world. So I get to look through a lot of what I think is really, really cool data and talk about it all day. I squarely fall into the middle of the millennial generation, so I think I'm officially not cool anymore.
We'll see. But joining us, we have Michael Barsky, who is head of Espro Switzerland. Now, Espro is a software company that's making waves. It helps some of the world's leading fintech companies modernize and digitize, and as a result, has real insights into how some of the younger generation operate and want to operate. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. Is you switch your mic and camera is on. So perhaps you could just tell us just a little bit more about Espro, because I know you have an interesting background. You're a Swiss company, but looking at your company, you have a lot of Ukrainians working for you. Perhaps you could just tell us how that came to be.
Yes, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here as well. And indeed, it's true. So we originally Ukrainians, and I'm Ukrainian myself. So 10 years ago, started a company in Ukraine, and 2 years ago, we end up in having a headquarter and opening in Switzerland. And I'm responsible for all operational and client-facing and interaction with the clients on site in Switzerland, and actually talking and being having a luxury to be in a fintech quarter of Europe. And sorry for the you maybe someone from UK who think it's as well. So I think it's two headquarters of Europe for sure. It's very often they're facing the questions in terms of how to engage the generation Z, millennials, and so on. And that's what we work in, and using innovations to help. And saying the same what is Veronica said, I'm also not cool anymore, even though that even though that as well a millennial, but unfortunately I have to admit it as well.
Okay, Michael, thank you so much. Okay, Veronica, let's plunge in. I mean, Gen Z, I think of them as people who don't just use the internet, but they're just immersed in the digital world. Their smartphone is never far away from their eyeballs. But just tell me, Gen Z as a concept, do you feel that intuitively it is a distinct cohort and there is something unique about that particular generation?
It is. And I'll preface that by also saying, that's not a bad thing, right? Because I think also the sort of intergenerational relationships have gotten quite a lot of flack, right? So, and you're also talking to a political science nerd. So generations are often defined by a lot of the history and the macro things in their environments. So, and for Gen Z in particular, it's, growing up, and not only in a very globalized world, but growing up as digital natives. So they're the first generation to be born into fully using computers from, when they're learning how to speak. Whereas I still grew up in the generation of printing out maps from Google or MapQuest, if anyone remembers it. But Gen Z is going to be another generation that is defined by a financial crisis, international conflicts, and interestingly, in a totally different way that they relate to money and the financial system. So not only by being born into using digital products, but by being much more conscious savers than even my own generation, being attuned to different financial products available to them, but also having really significant anxiety around their future financial prospects, much like ourselves, the millennials.
That's great. And I mean, Michael, I think of Gen Z as impatient. They're digital natives, but they, TikTok was built around the 15-second clip. They've no patience, but also they're thoroughly intolerant of the legacy systems that came before. I mean, I have a bank account with one with Halifax, one with Lloyd's, and they like to post me letters once in a while. If I receive a CHAPS payment to Halifax or Lloyd's, they will post me a confirmation. Now, the person who designed that, you can tell what generation they are. So, Michael, what do you think? I mean, does Gen Z have different expectations, different ways of operating?
They and I have to admit that this even 15 seconds is already too long for them. Honestly, it's the attention grabbing should be really less than 10 seconds based on the researches that we are doing when we engage with the clients. And you are right. I thought that millennials actually are very impatient can be, but when you see how the Gen Z's, let's say, thinking and behavior, they are as well very, very fast in acting. And what I agree as well is what you saying and what Veronica mentioned, that for Gen Zs, it's very important to act fast, to react fast, and they are not waiting. They don't, taking this time and so on. So definitely the behavior is changed, and the companies who want to attract them, like all the banks, which you said, they will never do it if they will not change their attraction models for the Gen Zs.
For sure. I mean, Veronica, I tend to think of them as being quite anarchic as well. I mean, baby boomers would go and see a financial advisor maybe once every 3 years, hand their money over, and then not think about it for another 12 months, 2 years, 3 years. I think my uncle had a checkup once every 10 years about his finances. Or people used to buy the Investors Chronicle magazine and listen to the sage advice of columnists who may or may not know what they're talking about. Whereas Gen Z is just totally different, isn't it? I mean, they're getting their information from the internet, from TikTok, from peers. Just tell me about their way of thinking about financial advice. I mean, it's just a complete break from the past, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's very self-sufficient broadly, right? And so, Gen Z, they actually get 85% of Gen Z have taken some financial advice from social media to make a financial transaction, which is a really interesting thing. So I don't know if it's so much anarchic as it is self-sufficient. And some of that might be the reasoning where, as a generation, they also are largely much more anxious about money and their financial prospects. So that self-sufficiency kind of lends itself to, well, maybe there's some socioeconomic structures that haven't supported me in managing an increasing cost of living or potentially worsening job prospects or inflation. It's very symptomatic of that. But it is really interesting that they are by far the generation that spends the most time researching online how to get financial advice, how to find it for themselves, how to save. These are the topics that they are actually searching online, but they are searching those topics on social media. And again, 85% have taken some financial advice on social media.
It's great, Mercy. If any of our viewers have a question for our panel, please just punch it into the box, and I'll put the question. But Veronica, just to riff on that, I'm interested in the idea of costs, because I mean, something that drives me crazy is going to the airport and seeing queuing up at Travelex, where they're going to, I'm going to say steal. Sorry, Travelex, I'm not a fan. They will steal 40% of your money on the grounds that average consumer just can't work out the percentage on the fly. People are stressed at the airport. Whereas Gen Z are pretty clever. They're using, Revolut. They're using all sorts of FX services to pay the absolute minimum possible. And I think, yeah, good for them. Thank God someone's done the research and is breaking up the industry. But is that right? And so they're doing their own research, and they are, as you say, independent thinkers, which makes them pretty intelligent customers.
They're the first generation to also fundamentally trust fintech. So I'll also give you an example. When Revolut came into my life about 5 or 6 years ago, as someone who has family abroad, who travels quite a bit for work, Revolut absolutely changed the game for even just myself, right? And then so I'm talking to my dad, who's a baby boomer, like he's a cool boomer, but he's a boomer. And I'm trying to tell him what Revolut is, and I'm trying to explain TransferWise to him. Now, I mean, the company's now called Wise, right?
Yeah.
And he still didn't get it. He said, is it secure? Is it, are your transactions encrypted? And now, Gen Z are that first generation where they just fundamentally trust fintech. I was still that last generation where I had to do my research and defend to, my boomer parents why I'm using these financial products and why they're new and why, a bank like Chime could get their banking license and be a really valid financial product. Gen Z's not like that at all. They just fundamentally trust fintech. I think that's also something has to say, like the work that the fintech industry has done to build that trust and credibility and ensure their consumer duty of care. But it's a huge generational shift. It's really, really interesting to watch the way that Gen Z also will much faster sign up and start doing their banking with the neobank, whether or not that bank yet has that banking license in their particular jurisdiction. Really interesting pattern.
Well, the sign up is so fast. I mean, Monzo, sign up 5 minutes. It's wonderful. Michael, you deal with a lot of fintech companies that are, or legacy companies often, who are hoping to modernize, but maybe are staffed by people of old generations. I mean, how bad is the kind of legacy banking industry, first of all, at dealing with younger generation customers, but also dealing with the technologies that are required to serve them? I mean, our viewers do not need telling how terrible some legacy banks' core banking systems and tech stacks are. So what's your experience of the ability of legacy organizations to serve Gen Z?
Let's say I will be here politically correct and will say that it's just quite bad. The situation with the core banking solution, and we're talking about the banks who has hundreds of years of the history. And I will give you an example that one of the oldest banks in, for example, Switzerland, they use it and they have their own core banking system. But because most of their developers who developed it already go into pension, and they started and they faced 7 years ago, they faced with an issue that they had to partner with the several institutes to motivate the new generation with giving him a super high, let's say, salaries, potential salaries that they will get. They will give students a free education as well to learn specific old languages, which is absolutely not fashion, with a warranty that they will take them on board for 1 or 2 years for them to stay. That's how bad it is if we're talking about really old-fashioned ones. And most of the companies are doing it a bit different at the moment. And what I see and what we are facing is actually for the Gen Zs, it's important transparency. That's why they work in, and that's why they okay to work with the really neobanks, because for them it's more important that it's transparent, it's fast, they know their partners, they know that impact that company is doing more if they have a license or no. That's true. And even myself, I'm being a professional in it, of course, obliged me to learn if they are FINMA regulated or FCA regulated or no. But still, when I was first starting to use TransferWise, when it was TransferWise, I didn't check what license they have. And it was, 7, I think, years ago. So currently, a lot of banks understand that it's too complicated to renew their system, and they bring in some cooperation and collaboration with companies who provide core banking solutions for the neobanks, for the digital banks, which you can build on top. And that's one of the options. And some of the banks even launching a separate products for Gen Zs, for kids of their clients as well. which then it's much easier than to change what they had before, because this legacy is just insane.
Yeah, I love it. I love that point you made about recruitment, because one of the joys of cloud native companies is that the technologies are the same across industries. I think Taylor Dolezal, who's the VP of Ecosystem at the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, told me the slogan is different companies, same team. So you can go and work from, you can work at Google, you can move to Lyft or Spotify, or go over to Thought Machine or Form 3 in the fintech world, and you're using the same tools, which if you're a young software engineer is wonderful because you're continuing to progress. But Mike, is there a danger that if banks haven't modernized their systems, as you say, recruitment's a nightmare because no one wants to work learning some garbage legacy system that's going to pigeon them whole as an obsolete worker. They're going to be stuck at that bank because there's nowhere else to go. So in purely in terms of recruitment, if you want to attract Gen Z engineers, you need to be a cutting edge cloud native company.
I have to even admit that you not only kept the Gen Zs thinking that they will stick that to only one bank. It scares them. So what we see, and we have a lot of course, the guys who starting when they are 17, 18, even starting coding and starting to work in IT in general, and they really scared of being like locked in one company. And in average, just recently read that in 2 years, the Gen Z guys, they changing 3-4 jobs because they want to explore, they want to try, and they want to have something different. So it's definitely could be an issue. And with all new banks, new platforms for asset management and so on, they mostly use AWS, Azure parts and so on, and using modern stack in order to be able to support it, because all the new technology, of course, have a lot of possibilities to support and to maintain it in a much easier and efficient way, especially with coming AI to the stage as well.
Okay. Now, I mean, Veronica, you have your finger on the pulse here because you're in the lucky position of talking to your members at Innovate Finance. How do they see this? How do they see recruitment and holding on to good people? Is there a war for talent?
I mean, there is a little bit, and it kind of depends who you ask, right? Because there's with a lot of the traditional financial institutions, there's still a lot of prestige of working for a company with a certain legacy versus something that's very tech savvy and forward thinking in fintech. So it's interesting because with the AI conversation, that this is what's up for debate now, actually, where a lot of the financial incumbents, they have massive pools of capital to invest really strategically into AI, and they've got quite a lot of lobbying power and loads of historical data, customer data as well. So if you've got a bank the size of, let's say, JP Morgan, or even in Europe, like we're looking at like Lloyds Bank in the UK or BBVA in Spain, if they wanted to put a concerted effort into building a strategic AI investment, it potentially could, right? Or that might happen through strategic partnerships with fintechs. But I also want to come back to Michael's point about how Gen Z see it. That certainly like an AI product or automated products are really exciting. But when Gen Z also look at their career prospects, there's another consideration there. It's not just about trying different things. It's also the fact that, we no longer really get a workplace pension that sets us up for life. Again, 2 generations ago, the boomers, when you joined a company, you stayed at that company for 20 years because you had a pension, you had a guaranteed retirement if you worked at that company for 20 or 30 years. You could effectively buy a home with a high school degree. Mortgages were affordable. And that's no longer the case. So, it's actually, you start to see this trend a little bit with Gen X, but certainly with millennials and definitely with Gen Z. The job hopping it's matter of practicality, because it's effectively the only way that you can get real wage growth and actually start to compound your savings, and you're building a pension all by itself. So the idea of getting stuck into one company for 20 years is actually a risk. You want to create evergreen tech skills, so that you can move around and have that mobility. That's why that tech education is so important. And that's also why, a lot of these financial products, these new financial products, are also so important to Gen Z. It's a form of developing your financial security when maybe the sort of macro circumstances around you haven't been supportive.
Gosh, that makes absolutely perfect sense. And Michael, yeah, we actually have a question from the audience. Michael, Diraj Saxena asks whether AI looking for behavior analytics of the customer can support them with their financial challenges. I mean, robo advice and that kind of thing is pretty well established. Perhaps you guys tell us about the way AI is used to serve Gen Z, and that's the kind of services that Gen Zs demand that maybe weren't really existing just maybe even 5 years ago.
Absolutely, the answer is yes, because most of the banks, and that is one of the biggest problems of the banks, to really be driven by the by the AI, is actually because they not really know how to use a huge load of data that they have about their customers, about their behavior, and so on. And actually, AI is helping, and the banks who are more earlier started to implement AI, not only in fraud detection, for making like more analytic in terms of the potential loan returns and so on, who is really using AI to understand the behavior of their customers and how to change and use this analytics to embed this data into the processes, into the engagement, into the communication, and so on with their customers, especially with the Gen Zs. That's why it's so important, and that's why as well Gen Z go into not all the banks, where for the old-fashioned banks and the traditional banks and so on, for them much more important a process and not the result. And all the Gen Zs, they result driven. For them, that's is more important than to be in the process and to be super slow. Like nearly 100% of all the Gen Zs who use traditional banks, they are frustrated with the processes of the banks. And I used to work in a big bank myself, in BNP Paribas back in the days in Ukraine, and we were one of the most innovative at that time and so on. But still, I left the bank exactly because of the processes, because it's just too complicated. And you have process for the process, and this is not about really today's let's say values that next generation who is stepping in more to a workforce, stepping more to get in the wells, doing the investments and so on, who really will be using all the services.
Love this. I really have in my mind that it's up for Gen Xer. I want to learn from Gen Z. I think they have better working practices. I think, and I used the word anarchic earlier, and Veronica corrected me rightly and said, no, they're independent. They take control of what they're doing. But working practices, who wants to sit in an hour-long meeting? I remember working with a guy who's worked at the British Confederation of British Industry, notoriously old and stuffy, and he would schedule every meeting for an hour because that's how long meetings take. It doesn't matter whether you had anything to say or not. That's what happened, and you wore pinstripe suits. And it's a dreadful way of working. So you think, Michael, that we can learn from Gen Z that their impatience, their sense of independence, these are assets. These are good things. Even moving, from company to company, you take what you've learned, you go somewhere new, you can share what you've learned, you can learn something new. This is a much better approach. I think, Michael, we're learning from these people, aren't we?
We let's say if someone is not doing that, he better start to do it, because it's such a important thing to really not only listen, but also hearing what they saying and applying it, because what a bit earlier Veronica mentioned as well about that for her father need to explain about that it's not let's say illegal activity that bank Revolut or Wise and so on, and that Gen Z is searching and they doing all research online and mainly on their mobile phones. The way how they can operate and observe the information and analyze it, it's getting much closer to the computer than ourselves, and that's exactly because the environment that they grew into is fully digital, and they had access to it, so they learned themselves how to do it. And I not only, think, though I myself have been learning that and even used once with my client. So we have a client who is having a application for a sport industry for motivate people to move and so on. And they have an avatar. So I spoke with my 9-year-old daughter and her 2 classmates, and I showed them the application. I said, what do you think? Do you want to use? And she, no, I don't want. And then I said, but here's an avatar, like you can create it. So cool. That's attract them. But then they said, okay, but why then this avatar is not also changing or growing or changing the behavior how we do? So if we move more, then it should become more fitty and so on. And I'm like, wow, it's like, you remember the Tamagotchi stuff, back in nowadays. So I went to the client and I give him his idea, and he like, whoa, that's a very interesting idea. And it's real. So it's 9 years old. Really, it's just
Michael,
a different
you reminded
thing.
me of a tale of, there was a documentary on the fall of Nokia. And when the iPhone was launched, they're interviewing I think Nokia's sort of head of user interface development, and he said he took, day one, the iPhone home with him, and he said he knew there was stuffed when he saw his daughter's reaction, and she intuitively used it, and she said she slept with it under her pillow, and he thought, the reaction of his, I'm not sure whether she was 8 or 9 or whatever, told him everything, and they went to work the next day, and they're all glum-faced, and oh shit, we're absolutely screwed. They've cracked it. But Veronica, we have a question from the audience. Jerome Summerled asks, I think this is the essence of what we're talking about, so it's a good question. How can banks change what they offer to fit better with what Gen Z likes and wants? And if you've got the examples from some of the fintechs you know and love, feel free to draw them up, because I use Monzo. I love the way the app works. It's so intuitive. I love the fact it incorporates biometric so early on. And I compare it to the NatWest app, which is an utter piece of garbage. So one is kind of Gen Z, one is Gen X, practically baby boomer. But so how can banks change what they want to satisfy Gen Z and probably therefore the rest of us?
Yeah, well, look, one thing we already touched on it, but better in-app interaction. So I think Gen Z, they're something like 80% more likely to make payments with a digital wallet and to do their banking on mobile versus online, like even on a computer or going into a branch or using paper statements. So that experience with mobile banking, with mobile payments, money transfer needs to be seamless. But it's also about consumer protection as well, because Gen Z are far less likely to be regularly checking on the health of their bank accounts, checking for fraudulent activity, or for that matter, reading the terms and conditions. Which is kind of also my warning to Gen Z is like, please read your terms and conditions. And I, by admission, sometimes have signed things without fully reading the fine print. But what some fintech
they're not going to do that
actually,
though, are they? No one's ever going to read the terms and conditions.
Right? But something that like Monzo, for example, have done very well, and Revolut has done this as well, is when they started offering investment products in app. Monzo provides educational material so that you can read a short text and start to understand why certain financial products, whether it's stocks and shares or ETFs, why that might be risky. Revolut actually gives you a quiz before you invest in crypto. So you actually have to pass a quiz of about 5 or 6 questions. And if you get any of them wrong, it will not allow you to do a crypto transaction that day. So incorporating things that I think, whether it's not just education, but really making those digital banking products much more seamless, and perhaps look at automating some of that educational piece, whether it's through a quiz or somehow incentivizing the customer to check on their financial health. Those are things that if they can be done in app, protect your customer, they keep your customer loyal, and they keep your customer engaged. Other bits of it as well is any sort of like paperwork type things. If you can automate that in any way, just kind of focus on that sort of fast waning attention span. Also, that's a very specific thing that banks can do. But ultimately it comes down to that, is make the in-app experience user-friendly, make it pretty, make it automated, make it safe.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, I have a dual residency. I live some of the time in Estonia, which is the world's most digital government. And then I come back to the UK, and I'm currently ranting away at our current National Health Service, which still uses, and I'm not making this up, fax machines, 4,500 fax machines. It is still paper-based. Most hospitals, almost all, will still use paper. So if there's anyone watching this and your organization is posting bits of paper out to customers, please knock it off. But I'd love to just rewind really, because you kind of touched on crypto. And it occurred to me that the Gen Z are maybe a little vulnerable to crypto fads and things like that. And I just Revolut make it, there is like a 5-question thing, which is good of them to have a crack at it. But what do you think? I mean, is there a vulnerability, do you think, with online influencers? And I've noticed a lot of Gen Zs invest in sort of personal share trading courses because they want to trade on Robinhood. So there's, good for their education. But what do you think, Veronica? They're potentially suckers, aren't they?
Yeah, there is a certain vulnerability. And, you see in a couple different regulatory jurisdictions around the world, the US, the UK are having those conversations in particular about regulating finfluencers. So it's, by that, I mean, specifically those, bloggers, content creators who, are sharing content on things like crypto, game stocks, or meme stocks. Sorry, clearly not cool. I don't know my fintech slang. But it's regulating where you have to tag yourself as, an advert, as a finfluencer. You have to tag it if it's a sponsored post in any way, and that that's a really good thing. We've seen that actually some similar regulation pass in Europe and in the US as well, where like Instagram influencers have to put the hashtag ad just to let their audience know that the product they're speaking so highly about is a paid advertisement.
But also a good way to market. If you want to market to Gen Zs, right? You can't just take out an advert on British ITV network television because no one under 40 is watching it. Netflix doesn't have any ads. So finfluencers, right? I think you mentioned FTX as well, trying to recruit Taylor Swift?
Yeah. So this is the one that really, really drives me crazy. Is back in September or a little bit before that, before the fall of of the FTX, it came out in the news that Taylor Swift almost signed a contract with FTX to do some sort of promotion, and a lot of the PR is a bit murky around it as well. And then her team came out with a press release that she had been approached by FTX, but ultimately decided not to sign the contract. FTX hit back at Taylor Swift's PR team saying that actually, no, they had been the one to pull out of the contract. So what really, really gets me going is that you have arguably the most commercially influential woman in pop culture marketing towards very different generations. I mean, we've seen the success of her current music tour. It's causing literal earthquakes from the groundswell of crowds that she gets to her concerts. So for what actually really scares me, as someone who advocates for consumer safety and for good behavior in fintech and finance is, you have arguably the most powerful woman in music, in pop culture, who came within a hair's breadth of marketing a product that caused a lot of people to lose a lot of money. And there's a lot of folks who invest in crypto because traditional financial products are exclusionary. So we're talking about fairly vulnerable people to begin with. And so what I would personally like to see is a lot more regulation around finfluencers, but also how do you define a finfluencer? And how do you publish content when financial and especially investment products are being marketed, to any generation? But it is really, really something that gets me going, because there is a danger there.
So Taylor Swift came within a hair's breadth of bankrupting the Swifties.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
I'm imagining that's absolutely hilarious. But it raises a really serious point. I mean, the kind of internet Reddit-based investment concepts, and we saw what happened with GameStop, and there will be more incidents like that where people jump up and down on a stock just to see what they can do.
It's interesting,
I'd say lols,
right?
but that's not Gen Z speak, is it? But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at a forum like Reddit, this is not investment advice by any stretch of the imagination, right? But it's largely an anonymous platform. So there's some really interesting dialogue that does happen on Reddit, and a lot of peer-to-peer education. Versus a channel like TikTok or Instagram, where a content creator really builds a brand around them and gathers that influence based on their personal brand. So these are very, very different channels. Neither is necessarily better than the other, but there are fintech products out there that do rest on peer-to-peer education. So a company, like if you look at this company called shares.io, again, also not a promotion, but they're a cool company coming out of France and the UK that is kind of like WhatsApp meets Revolut, where you can add your contacts, share peer-to-peer information on what types of products you're investing in, and you're removed from that influencer cycle and really focused on that peer-to-peer education space. And again, you see Revolut, Monzo, some of those big fintech unicorns pushing out similar products to move away from that influencer focused to much more peer-to-peer education.
Michael, you talk to all sorts of financial organizations. Are they having these conversations? I mean, this idea of educating consumers, making them pass tests before buying such financial products. Are the organizations you talk to switched on to the foibles and vulnerabilities of Gen Z?
Yes, that's what I wanted as well to add towards the question which was from Jerome, and which Veronica actually answered about Gen Zs, because what is doing the Revolut is like a prevention for sure. But what Gen Z at the moment is looking in financial applications, invest in possibilities to invest, is actually to have an educational platform inside, because they're learning from the TikTok or from the social media, mainly from the TikTok, from more than 85% of what Veronica mentioned. So if they can stay within the same application and have an easy way of understanding of it, and maybe some video explanation, it should be nice, it should be gamified, and then it will keep them within the bank, it will keep them within the investment application and so on. And back in the days, one of the investment fund came to us, and actually they were investing in bonds and securities and so on. Actually, between Ukraine and Poland mainly, they provide for the big institutions. And then they understand that they want to do something similar to what did the Robinhood. Because I myself, and you were talking about that the Gen Zs and people are maybe not that much investing in securities and more in crypto. I'm investing in crypto because for me, it's much easier to access to it, because there is no as simple access to be able to invest in securities. And Gen Zs, 50% of them already investing when they're 21. I was shocked when I came in Switzerland, and people, when they are 25, they are still afraid they're good in saving and not in the investments. So for the Gen Zs, it's important to be able to learn transparently. So to not have this, let's say, finfluencers. It's a good term. I actually liked it, and really to choose where they want to invest by learning themselves, because for them self-education is very important. The platforms or the banks, the asset management, investment companies who provide such digital experience within their application will keep and will attract more and more influencers like this. And with this fund, their target was actually the students, and it was three years ago. So the students and the people who want an access, and it's not about something big. So it's more about the learning inside of it, proving that you really learned and you did your investigation and due diligence, and then you do the investment. And these investments as well, you can track, because it's important to be able to see what is where are you standing and how you're doing, and not check every year or every quarter, the reports which is coming.
Fantastic. We actually have a question which about settlement times, which suddenly struck me, because I experimented with UK bank Halifax. They have a investment platform, and I thought, well, okay, I'll buy an ETF through that and see how it works. And because my money went missing, and I messaged them and said, my account's showing 0, it should have 10K in it. And they said, no, it's just between systems. It'll reappear in 3 days. And I thought, you utter bozos. Terrible standards. I mean, what about transaction settlement times? I mean, Michael, you've got the technical brain here. Is there any excuse for anything less than real time? What do Gen Z expect from the world?
Let's say there is no excuse for this except the old traditional system they don't want to change. Yeah. It's a monopoly of SWIFT and the SEPA, who are the biggest players. And they just don't want to breach this, because there is already so many proven technology advanced with the blockchain technology, like Ripple or other, the Ethereum network and so on, which you can add, and it should go in seconds. For Gen Z, I mean, not only for Gen Z, for myself, I'm right now struggling to do the payments within the Switzerland, between the banks, and sometimes it takes few days, and sometimes in the same bank. I literally don't understand why. I don't understand why. And if I will go into the, for example, conversation that some of the clients, when there is a transboarding payments happening, that's even worse, because if the money will hit, and by any chance you will make a mistake in the naming or in an account and so on, it will stop in a correspondent bank, and it can stay there for months. And you will be not able to find someone who will answer to you where is the money. Whether it's come, for example, the blockchain, you are able to see online. I had an issue with a wallet that I sent. I see that it's online, but it was a bug on the interface. It was not showing up. But at least for me, I was secured because I saw on the blockchain the money is there, so all is good. So, and this transparency, which I'm looking for, and definitely will be looking Gen Zs, and this is missing the current infrastructure in traditional finance.
Okay, and the final thing before we wrap up, I just want to talk about values, because for me, my perception is that Gen Z is values driven. They say, I mean, the insulting term is woke, and it's gone into that, but they're very sensitive to the the ethical orientation of companies. And actually, when I look at the fintechs that I really love, there's Revolut, Monzo, Wise. Estonian company in its origin. They're companies, I don't just use them, I really like them. I really have an emotional attachment to them. And I remember talking to Taavet Henriques when he launched TransferWise as it was then. And he was a man on a mission, and that really comes across in everything they do. And I look at some of the legacy banks like HSBC, NatWest, RBS, and they're sluggish, faceless corporations. Veronica, what do you think? I mean, am I hallucinating this? Do you think there is a different ethos around fintech? I mean, I worked for Thought Machine briefly, and Paul Taylor, CEO of Thought Machine,
Right.
is an
Great
incredible guy.
company.
Yeah, he just creates a phenomenal culture. It's one, I think, of Glassdoor, it scores #1 in the UK. I think perhaps not just fintech,
Yeah.
but all companies and the way they treat people. And it's absolutely the ethos, top to bottom, is wonderful. And I'm not just saying that; I don't work for them anymore. And I don't think people who work for HSBC or Barclays feel the same way about their employer. So is this right? Do you think that's right? That the companies that are good at Gen Z have a different outlook on life, a different morality, a different ethos, a different vibe?
Oh, very much so. And that extends, I think, to the external world as much as their internal world. I think Gen Z, they value, look, sustainability. So like really good ESG metrics, companies that actually care about how they impact the world around them. So, that companies operate in a humane way with regards to their suppliers, with regards to the environment around them. But also, as employees, Gen Z look to be treated like humans. They look to be valued as contributors, and they look for a positive company culture. I think that's a really great thing. The generational shift is definitely different from a few generations ago.
Okay, and Michael, really, just final question. Just it sounds as if we've concluded on a thesis here, or a theory that that if financial organizations can please Gen Z, they're setting the bar as high as it goes. You're dealing with the most scrutinizing, independent thinking, research-driven people who are impatient, quite rightly, but have the highest standards. So does that sound about right? That for companies that Espro works with, would you be saying to them, if you want to think of your most difficult customer to please, it will be Gen Z, and if you can make them happy, you can probably make everybody happy. Is that a working theory?
It is a working theory, and let's say most of us millennials who right now having mostly working and facing the clients and doing the handwork with the clients, workshops and so on. We have kids, and we can actually validate it as well with them, because it's really the Gen Z population. But it's definitely that if we our clients and in general the financial institutions, traditional banks, if they think that it's like it will go away, it will the Gen Z will grow up and they will start behave the same way how the baby boomers or Gen X guys or something, it will not. So they definitely have a different view. They have opinion on absolutely everything. For them is super important to see everything transparently and to understand the value. And actually adding as well to the last point from Veronica, for the Gen Z, it's important that to work with the company or to use the service of the company who value their employees. So the impact that they give with the, of course, ESG, how they serve to this planet and so on. But if they will find out that the CEO of the company, of the bank that they're using, or investment company, is playing around and the employees is not happy there, and he's giving him paychecks to go on a yacht, cruises and so on, and he's not treating his employees, they will quit. Even though that it would be the most cheapest, let's say, offer that they have on the market, the best quality gamification and so on. Really, if the, let's say, if I may say bad things on the call, but if the CEOs and the top management of the company is not that, let's say, accurate and treating their employees as a resources just, and not as a really people thanks to whom everything is done, they will not stay within the company. And for them it's important, and we definitely should we should to look into them and validate the ideas through them.
Okay, guys, thank you so much. I think that's a really good working theory. You keep Gen Zs happy, you can probably keep everybody happy because they have the highest standards. And yeah, if anyone would like to hire Michael's 9-year-old daughter to have a look at their user interface, what does she charge, Michael? 6 figures? I don't know. It's not as daft as it sounds. Yeah, I'm always happy to plug as well, the organizations that our guests, Veronica and Innovate Finance, don't really need a plug because everyone knows who you are, but the research that Innovate Finance puts out is always fantastic. Everything from the events, just the impact you guys have had on the fintech world. The UK, we like to be patriotic just occasionally, and fintech is something the UK does.
We've done a few things
well.
right.
So
yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Once in a bloom, and Michael, it's such a pleasure to host you. And yeah, I know you at Espro Switzerland are always happy to hear from banks, financial organisations who are hoping to modernise. You've helped many other people previously, and I'm sure you'd love to do it again. So, Michael, correct? You're always ready to hear from people.
Yes, absolutely, and it's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for sharing and giving the possibility to be here with you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Veronica, I just love that anecdote about Taylor Swift and FTX. She didn't ruin
That's going to haunt me.
a generation of young Americans. It didn't happen. So we can breathe a sigh of relief. But guys, thank you so much for your presence and expertise. I really appreciate it. So from FinTech Talk, thank you very much.
All right,
thank you.
Thanks again.
Bye-bye.